Even the most cursory scan of the news any day, any hour for the last 45 days reveals horrors from Gaza, each of which by itself would once have made global headlines. Today, for example, it is reported that at least 12 people have been killed by Israeli shelling of the Indonesian hospital, the last functioning hospital in northern Gaza. Israel is laying siege to the hospital where once again hundreds of patients, medical staff, and displaced people are trapped, as it has done at other hospitals in recent days. In two separate attacks reported on Saturday in Jabalia refugee camp, Israel bombed two residential buildings, killing 50 and 32 people, respectively, according to the UN. We no longer even know the exact death toll because of the collapse of communications and services in Gaza. But as the UN notes, the last official count as of November 10 days ago, was over 11,000 people killed in Gaza. The human rights group Euromed estimates that the true death toll is closer to 20,000, with thousands of people missing under the rubble with little hope of survival. This would mean that Israel has now exterminated 1% of the population of Gaza in just 40 days. What passes for good news these days is that 28 surviving premature babies from Al-Shifa Hospital have arrived in Egypt. 3 babies remain at the Emirati Hospital in Gaza. All the surviving babies are fighting serious infections and continue to need health care, according to a World Health Organization official. 5 of the babies had died in previous days due to the cutoff of electricity and fuel by Israel, according to the UN. And on Sunday, the UN reported that in the previous 24 hours, Israeli attacks had killed 6 journalists, bringing to almost 50 the number of Palestinian journalists killed since the launch of Israel's genocide. In the West Bank, it's hard to keep up with the daily raids on towns and refugee camps and the mounting toll of death and destruction there. Israel is adept at turning the exceptional, the unthinkable, into the normal. I was struck by the comments of Ibrahim Frehat, an associate professor at the Doha Institute. He said, "We started with the Al Ahli Baptist Hospital. It was bombed. There was an outcry over this, and Israel denied it. But then there was another attack, and it was received with no reaction from the international community because they got used to it. Now Israel is bombing hospitals and not even giving an explanation," Frehat said. He observed that the same pattern holds with Israel's attacks on schools. He says the first school attack was also received with international condemnation. But then on Saturday, Israel bombed 2 schools in northern Gaza, Al-Fakhura, and another one in Tel Za'atar. Frehat observed, even Israel is not claiming that there are Hamas fighters hiding there and is giving no explanation whatsoever. Israel pushes as far as it thinks it can go, when it receives no reaction, it pushes further. How much further will it go in this genocide? How much further does Israel want to go? Well, here's one indication. In the Jerusalem Post on November 19th, Israel's intelligence minister Ghila Gamliel wrote an op-ed with the upbeat-sounding headline, "Victory is an opportunity for Israel in the midst of crisis." This is the same intelligence ministry that authored a secret document which leaked a few weeks ago, planning for the ethnic cleansing of Gaza's population to Egypt under the guise of humanitarian intervention. Now Gamliel is making this proposal in the open. Gamliel writes, quote, "Instead of funneling money to rebuild Gaza or to the failed UNRWA, the international community can assist in the costs of resettlement, helping the people of Gaza build new lives in their new host countries," end quote. Ethnic cleansing never sounded so friendly. And there's another article, also published on November 19th in 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐥𝐞𝐿, one of Israel's leading newspapers. It's by 𝐄𝐥𝐿 𝐈𝐧𝐭𝐫𝐶𝐚, a senior research associate at the Institute for National Security Studies, a retired Israeli major general and former head of the Israeli National Security Council. Here's what 𝐈𝐧𝐭𝐫𝐶𝐚 writes. The way to win the war faster and at a lower cost for us requires a system collapse on the other side and not the mere killing of more Hamas fighters. The international community warns us of a humanitarian disaster in Gaza and of severe epidemics. We must not shy away from this, as difficult as that may be. After all, severe epidemics in the south of the Gaza Strip will bring victory closer and reduce casualties among IDF soldiers. And no, this is not about cruelty for cruelty's sake, since we don't support the suffering of the other sides as a goal, but as a means. End quote. As you can see, Israeli leaders are capable of rationalizing literally anything, while at the same time shamelessly describing themselves as the light, and the Palestinians they are busy exterminating as the darkness. And they are joined in this by most politicians in the West. If this is not genocide, the word has no meaning. But imagine if you could stop a genocide with a single act. Would you do it? Of course you would. That's what we're all taught to believe, that each of us is a good person who, if they had the chance to go back in history and do the one thing that could have stopped a past Holocaust, of course we would do it. I want to read you something that people have been sharing on social media in recent days. Perhaps you have seen it. It's an excerpt from a 2014 book called The Reagan Paradox by Lou Cannon. It recounts a well-known episode during Israel's 1982 invasion of Lebanon and siege of Beirut. Here's what Cannon writes. Reagan, who had considered Israel a trustworthy ally, was disgusted with what was happening in Lebanon. Israel's 10-week siege culminated with its planes bombing West Beirut for 11 consecutive hours on August 12th. At the suggestion of White House Deputy Chief of Staff Michael Deaver, Reagan called Israeli Prime Minister Menachem Begin. Menachem, this is a Holocaust, Reagan said. Mr. President, I think I know what a Holocaust is, Begin replied in a sarcastic voice. Reagan refused to give ground, bluntly telling Begin he had to stop the bombing. 20 minutes later, Begin called back, saying he had ordered Ariel Sharon to halt the attacks. Reagan thanked him, hung up, and said to Deaver, I didn't know I had that kind of power. End quote. I don't want to paint Ronald Reagan as some sort of saint. He certainly wasn't. And it was American betrayals in the days and weeks that followed that would lead to the massacre under Israeli oversight of thousands of Palestinian refugees at the Sabra and Shatila camps by Israeli-backed Lebanese militias. The point is that one man does have the power today to pick up the phone and order Benjamin Netanyahu to stop the bombing, to stop the genocide. That man is, of course, Joe Biden. Everyone knows that without the round-the-clock airlift from the United States, Israel would run out of bombs to drop on Palestinian children in days or weeks. But that's not who Joe Biden is. And it's not who Joe Biden has ever been. Let's go back again to the Israeli invasion of Lebanon in 1982. Shortly after that war, Menachem Begin met with members of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee in Washington. When he got back to occupied Jerusalem, Begin told Israeli reporters, quote, a young senator rose and delivered a very impassioned speech. I must say that it's been a while since I've heard such a talented speaker, and he actually supported Operation Peace for Galilee, end quote. Of course, Operation Peace for Galilee is the name Israel gave its bloodbath in Lebanon. The young senator that Begin was referring to, Joe Biden, said he would go even further than Israel, that he'd forcefully fend off anyone who sought to invade his country, even if that meant killing women or children. I dissociated myself from these remarks, Begin said. I said to him, "No, sir, attention must be paid. According to our values, it is forbidden to hurt women and children, even in war. Sometimes there are casualties among the civilian population as well, but it is forbidden to aspire to this. This is a yardstick of human civilization, not to hurt civilians." Of course, Begin was lying. Israel has always murdered men, women, and children without thought and with total impunity. But even for Menachem Begin, the former Irgun terrorist, Biden's pro-Israel extremism was too much to openly associate himself with. Biden hasn't changed, and sadly, nor has the rest of the American ruling class. If anything, their unconditional support for Israel is even more extreme, turbocharged now with Christian Zionist fanaticism. And people are noticing. President Joe Biden's approval rating has declined to the lowest level of his presidency, 40%, as strong majorities of all voters disapprove of his handling of foreign policy and the Israel-Hamas war, according to the latest national NBC News poll. That network reported on Sunday. NBC adds, and I quote, "The erosion for Biden is most pronounced among Democrats, a majority of whom believe Israel has gone too far in its military action in Gaza, and among voters aged 18 to 34, with a whopping 70% of them disapproving of Biden's handling of the war." This poll is a stunner, and it's stunning because of the impact the Israel-Hamas war is having on Biden, says Bill McInturff of Public Opinion Strategies, one of the pollsters that conducted this survey. I don't mention this because I care about Joe Biden's approval rating or how he or his party are going to do in this or that election. I mention it as a reminder of how even here in the United States, the vast majority of people are utterly horrified by what Israel and the Biden administration are doing in Gaza, despite the barrage of propaganda telling the public that the mass extermination of Palestinian children is just Israel exercising its alleged right to self-defense. It is this popular disgust and anger expressed all over the world that remains the main hope for people in Gaza and for us. The one message that all our friends in Gaza keep repeating whenever they can reach us is to stay in the streets, to keep protesting, to keep calling your representatives. Don't take the pressure off. People in Gaza are counting on you. They're counting on all of us together.
Thanks for watching this video. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, hit like, leave a comment. These engagements help us with the YouTube algorithm, and it helps us to get around Silicon Valley censorship as much as possible. It does make a difference. You can also support our journalism by going to electronicintifada.net and clicking on donate now. Thank you.